Hello, Gen Genies. Before we get started, Rich and I want to let you in on some exciting updates for our Patreon subscribers.
Patreon is a site where listeners can pledge a small monthly amount, either $5 or $10, to support the cost of bringing you your favorite podcast.
All patrons get early access to new CutOff Jeans episodes before they're released to the public.
And along with our undying gratitude, you'll also be able to join our special patron-only Facebook group.
But the most exciting new perk is exclusive access to essays I'm writing from my upcoming memoir. And you guys can help me be editors.
New Patreon supporters will also get a shout-out on the podcast.
Rich and I enjoy bringing you the CutOff Jeans podcast and would mean so much if you would consider supporting our labor of love.
Just go to patreon.com/CutOff Jeans podcast.
Thank you all so much, my Gen Genies.
And now, on with the show.
Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip hip hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Jeans.
Welcome to CutOff Jeans, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I am Julie Dixon Jackson. I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, henceforth known as a Junior Gen Genie. That's a long time callback.
Wow.
But I'm also the producer and co-host of this podcast, in addition to being a Junior Gen Genie. I wonder if I'll ever get to promoted to, I don't know, Senior Gen Genie, or I don't know.
Not unless you really commit yourself, and I'm not expecting that to happen.
I know, right? Hi, Julie. What's going on?
Mercury's in retrograde.
Is it?
Whatever that means.
I don't even know.
I don't know. I have a belief that means something in the same way that I believe in the lunar cycles, changing people's brain chemistry. Okay, that is a thing. Let me tell you, in the very basic sense of that, being somebody that worked in a hospital,
yes,
in medical records, it is ask any hospital. It is a well-known fact that during a full moon, visits to the ER double.
Really?
Yes, and there is scientific basis to it. The moon, the way that the cycles of the moon or the stages of the moon have to do with the tides. Does our brain, what happens in our brains with the way I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it coincides with the tides as well.
I guess if the moon can lift the tide and recede the tide, it can do something to to us as well, right?
Yes,
yeah.
It's the same thing. It's all in the same wavelength. But I know that there is scientific basis to this.
I totally buy it and believe it. Mm-hmm. I just don't know that I personally am that, in tune.
Invested?
Not invested, just not in tune with it. I've felt that way where, things are going wrong. Oh, it must be, full moon. And I look and no, it's not a full moon. It's just things are going wrong.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. And whenever I get it, so this past weekend I was in a real funk, for various things. One possibly being Mercury in retrograde. One might say I'm on social media too much. All of these things. And I was I was in a dark place. Then on Monday, I kind of really tried to scoop myself out of it. And I went and had a little bite and a drink with my friend Shannon. And then I came home and fell asleep early, then promptly woke up throwing up. Which is weird for me. And it was just all very jarring, obviously. And so on the next day, I was kind of taking stock of what led me to that, and suddenly realized that Monday was the 6th anniversary of the death of my father. I think maybe that subconsciously had a lot to do with it too. Normally I remember, I take note that we're coming up to the date, and this year it kind of bypassed me, but my body still remembered, I think.
I also totally buy into that. I have had similar experiences, not recently, but where I'm in a weird mood and I don't know why. And then I look at the calendar and I realize, this is the anniversary of something, It's never something good. It's not like, good, this is the anniversary of when, I don't know, my bar mitzvah. Actually, for me,
and it did not go well.
that might be just as traumatic as a loss. But anyway, I digress. The point is, I do believe our bodies remember even when we don't, you know?
Yeah. The body remembers.
Yeah. But as far as social media, sometimes you need to take a break from that because it can get really toxic. And we've talked about that. And I try not to go down those rabbit holes because they get really, really depressing. And, as often as I'm reminded how terrible people can be, if I watch certain Twitter feeds about like dogs and animals and stuff, what's it called? The dodo? Do you ever see the dodo?
Yes, the happy animal cute things can take you right out of it.
It totally can. It's so silly.
Also, any episode of the British series Taskmaster will take me out of it.
I actually really like the Taskmaster too. And the British Bake Off. I mean, so,
That I don't watch. I think I'm too jaded to enjoy the British Bake Off like I enjoy Taskmaster.
Really? I find it so, I don't even cook and I don't like to cook. What I do like to do is get a baked treat and watch it and eat it while I watch the show. Because everybody's just so kind to one another and they're just trying their best to make something good out of nothing.
But see, that's which I appreciate. But the difference between that and Taskmaster is that it's not so kind, but it's all very lighthearted.
Yes.
And it's professional comedians and nobody's taking themselves too seriously, but it's hilarious. Yes. Check it out, you guys. It's on YouTube. It's one of the greatest things that ever has entered my life. Okay. So, hey, let's talk about the Patreon really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So, wait, I have shout outs for new Patreons that I realized that I have been remiss
Oh, yeah, we've got to do that.
The past few weeks. So, shout out to Sherry McNeil, Sarah Purcell, who I think is from England, Michelle Chandler, Sandy Smith, Daphne Garrison, and Laura Allegria are all new patrons, and I appreciate it. And our new $10 patrons are getting my latest. If a man wants them, he can have them too. But I finally came up with a jewelry design that looks like DNA. Do you see these?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I can't see it as well in this Zoom meeting.
Sure.
But I saw a picture of it that you posted on Facebook. And it's great.
I love it because I've tried other DNA designs and they look just too kind of like crafty.
Yeah.
Whereas this looks, it's not so on the nose.
Yeah, it's not
it
obvious.
It just suggests it. Yes, and it's pretty.
Yeah.
So that's my latest bonus gift for a $10 patrons.
I love it.
So thank you, new patrons. And the new patrons are enjoying the extra bonus. There is an extra bonus episode. So they're basically getting a new episode every week.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So
we don't even do a new episode every week.
That's what I mean. So they get an episode every week,
right,
whereas our regular listeners get an episode every other week.
Gotcha. That's great. Thank you, Patreon members.
Thank you, patrons. And I'm glad you're enjoying the new content. Okay, so I went to the Catalina Film Festival premiere of Reckoning with the Primal Wound.
Yes.
With Rebecca Autumn Sansom. And I did a TikTok about getting ready for it. And then I shot a bunch of footage at the event, just like little snippets.
Did you really? Good for you.
Well, I did, but then I accidentally deleted it all. So
she's tech savvy enough to remember to document all of these things.
To do it, but then not how to keep it. So that's really on brand for me, if you think about it.
Isn't it just on your phone?
Well, no, it was in TikTok because I wanted to edit it in TikTok.
I see. Okay.
And do a thing, but I apparently did not save it to drafts. All that was left was my dinner with friend of the show, Eve Sturgis, and two other friends whose names escape me. I apologize. They are new. One's an adoptee, one's an NPE, but their names escape me, but they were lovely, and it was really nice meeting them. Also nice meeting Emma Stevens, author of The Gathering Place. I didn't know what Emma looked like, so she came up to me and she said, Emma Stevens. And then she told me her real name because Emma's a pseudonym.
I see.
So I sat next to her, and right after the movie started, there was this shot of somebody, of an adoptee, of their face saying something to the camera. And I'm like, and I turned to her and I said, is that you? And she's like, yeah.
And then you heard from behind you, shh.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, she's in it only under a different name.
I see.
Which was fun.
It's a small world, huh? All of these people that, I mean, I know all of these names from our interviews.
Yeah, it was great. It was good. And hey, we got a little, we got a frame in the film now.
Really?
There was one small section about social media and how it's changing the face of adoption and what have you. So there was like a little shot of our logo, which was nice to see. I was like, hey, that's us. So yeah. Anywho, it was really great. Congratulations, Rebecca. There are still streaming options, like streaming parties. And I believe in October on Vimeo, you have the option to actually purchase the movie, to have it. So you can stream it whenever you want, which I think is a great idea.
How great. And it was nice that you got to go and see it with an audience of friends, of people that like-minded people, I should say, because you don't know them all, but still.
Yes. And unlike-minded people who which was interesting, because half of us there were very passionate about the subject and the other half were very confused about the subject. So
they were just going because it was part of the festival.
Yes,
I see.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
It is the whole point. The idea.
The whole point is to get the idea out there and get more people in on the conversation and not just hearing one side of the whole story.
I mean, because to bring this back to theater, because we always do, one of the reasons that I have subscribed to the same theater for years and years and years, the Mark Taper Forum here in Los Angeles, is because I'd say a good 80% of the shows I would probably, if I didn't subscribe, I would never have bought a ticket to. And yet I'm more often than not really glad that I went to see it. And
exactly.
There's subject
sometimes
matters.
It's good.
Yes, that I
sometimes
go,
it's good to have things, what's the word, procured for you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it introduced me to a lot of stories I never would have seen, and that's why I always tell people subscribe to a good theater, because it forces you to go, because you buy all the tickets up front, sometimes without even knowing what the shows are going to be, and then you're more often than not pleasantly surprised. I mean, not everything is for everybody, but if you're interested in expanding your universe a little bit,
right. Let me see. Let's talk about. So a friend of the show, Liz Cook, sent me an article from her local newspaper. She lives in Ohio, and she thought it might be of interest to us. Columbus Apartments implement DNA testing program for dog poo. So it is exactly what it sounds like, gang. A Columbus property management company is combating an age-old problem with a high-tech solution. They're testing the DNA of dog waste. According to Elle Lamb, a social media marketing specialist at Oakwood Management Company, the group's 50-plus properties participate in a program known as Poo Prints, which tests the DNA of leftover dog waste and finds the animal's owner. Whenever a resident moves in and they have a dog or they get a dog, we bring the pup into our office and swab their mouth for DNA. If we find waste on the property, we send it off to the lab for DNA testing, and if there's a match, the dog's owner gets a fine.
Well, I mean, this sounds very expensive because you got to pay for those tests and all of that, and then you have to test each poop sample. It's probably a hefty fine.
It's a $300 fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's going to cover the cost, right?
Right, exactly. And so people are going to be more aware. They know that I think it's actually brilliant. It's kind of like putting those signs up, those security signs up saying that, such and such alarm is, even if it's not, is attached to this house, because it deters people.
Yes. I think it's really funny and interesting, because you know what? For people who don't pick up their dog's poop, it's really crappy. You knew I had to go there. And I wanted to say another word, but this is a family podcast.
I'm sure it is. Yeah. So let's finish out this segment. Should we talk about your new DNA?
Sure. Yeah, this just happened this morning. Yeah. Basically, I got a message on Ancestry from somebody I don't know that apparently is like a fifth cousin.
He's a fifth to eight. He's an 8 centimorgan match.
Yeah, so really small,
what he
really
is.
far
Yeah.
back that we match on. We had a common ancestor apparently.
You may have a common
We may
ancestor.
have a common ancestor.
Right.
And so I quickly got Julie on the case because I'm
Yes,
like,
you got
I am
me on
only
the
a junior
case.
Gengini. So I quickly went up the ladder right over his head to Julie.
Sure. Yes, exactly. All right. So he is the ancestor that he thinks connects you is Lipkind.
Yes.
And now you have Libkins in your family. Which it's very common for names to change over the years in different branches of a family to change it. And it's highly possible, probably likely, that your Libkins were once Lipkins or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So your Lipkind matches, your highest one is 138 centimorgans, which is pretty high.
Yes.
So I feel very strongly that Lipkind is your Libkind.
Well, I know for a fact that was the maiden name of name of my great grandmother on my mother's
Correct.
side. So yes.
Correct. We don't know much about before that, unfortunately, because they started in Lithuania or Russia.
Yes.
And it's very hard to search records there.
Yeah.
But the Lipkind matches, especially this 138 one, highly suggest, because that's a very high match.
Yes.
That's almost a second cousin. So I'm pretty sure if we were able to dive a little deeper that we would be able to make a connection. This particular match, who also has Lipkins, I can't say for sure that is what is right. I would feel more confident saying that if he was a match in common with this 138 centimorgan Lipkind, but he is only 8 centimorgans, and Ancestry only shows shared matches of above 20 centimorgans.
I see.
So even if he is a shared match, they're not going to tell me that.
I see. Yeah.
If everybody agrees to upload their DNA to another operation that has a chromosome browser, and we can see if everyone, like all of those that have that name, have shared this chromosome, overlap in that chromosome, that would be a more significant
Sure.
sign.
Well, you know what? I will respond to him and just let him know what I know to share. You know, there's no harm in that. But we do match on 8 centimorgans, so we are somewhat related somewhere.
You are related. You are most likely related somewhere.
Yes.
8 centimorgans and up is more significant. I have, because of Thru-lines, I have 8 centimorgan and below matches that they are such low matches, you can't guarantee it, but we do share DNA, and they do have the same names in their tree from the same general area. So that to me is more evidence than not that is where we connect.
Thank you, Gengini.
You're welcome.
You can go back in your bottle as we take a break. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Genes Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
All right, we're back.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, let's do a little book nook. I've recently added some new things to the book nook list. I'm also adding other podcasts and other outlets for adoptees or people interested in genetic genealogy to that list. So
You're a regular bibliography, aren't you?
That's me. So there is a lady named Laura K. Joy that I reached out to because I noticed she had some books that I was very interested in. She sent me copies of them, and I'm so glad she did because I'm obsessed with them. So they're these 3 books, and they for all intents and purposes, they're children's books. What I think, and the fact that they're children's books, I love because they get straight to the point. These are the perfect tool for potential adoptive parents to have in their library to read with their children and to also, for them, aside from that, read for themselves to understand the things that most adoptees feel but do not know how to express. Okay?
Yes.
So this first one, and they're illustrated by Laura Foote too, and the illustrations are amazing. So this first, I'm showing you as if anybody else can see it, but I just want to show you.
It's called Nobody Looks Like Me.
Nobody Looks Like Me, an adoptee experience, self-attunement, an adoptee superpower.
That one doesn't sound quite as child-friendly as Nobody Looks Like Me.
Yes. Self-attunement, attunement's a big word. Yeah.
As soon as you said Nobody Looks Like Me, I'm like, what a great title for a book about, a very common experience for adoptees. Yeah.
Yep.
The second one, I'm not so sure.
This one is going to confuse you even more, but it's my favorite. Goodbye, hypervigilance.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay, so good. And this was the
no
one.
Comment.
This was the one that to me, I was like, what? I have to have this book because hypervigilance is my middle name, Julie Hypervigilance Jackson.
We always just shorten it to Hyper.
Yes, well, that's a whole different story. So this is Sarah. Sarah was adopted when she was a baby. See how calm Sarah looks? But she isn't. Sarah's hypervigilant. Others just can't see it. Being hypervigilant means you're on alert and sensitive to your surroundings. She thinks it is her personality, how she's wired, who she really is, but it isn't. And it goes on from there. It's just explaining. And for me, my hypervigilance manifested as worry. Like I kept being worried all the time. And that's what hypervigilance is. It's predicting what might happen and it being your worst fear. Henceforth, the hypervigilance. So I am thrilled to have these books, and I'm thrilled to recommend them to anybody and everybody.
Yes, and I'll just say I wasn't trying to make fun of those titles as
I know you weren't,
because as in terms of whether they're good books or not. I'm just saying the first one sounded like a book for a child, and the second and third, not as much.
Which is, and you know what? None of them are strictly, nobody should just give those to a child without any explanation.
Right.
They should be read with an adult and with an adult who has read them first.
Yes.
I believe. She also sent me this book, The Flourish Experience, which is a series of essays and snippets written by other adoptees. From a writing group that she was a part of that I've not read yet, but it's a beautiful book, and I can't wait to read it. And so there you go.
Have you added these new titles to the book?
I have.
Oh, great.
I've not added the Flourish Experience. I have the other ones, though.
Once you read it and approve it.
Yeah, I approve it. Laura has a couple of essays in there, too.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yes. Okay, I've been trying to tell this story for weeks, and it keeps getting preempted, so I'm going to tell it now.
Well, we've had a lot of breaking DNA news, Julie.
Indeed. And the Queen died. Okay. DNA analysis solves mystery of bodies found at bottom of medieval well. This is from CNN. Construction workers breaking ground in 2004 on a shopping mall in Norwich, England, Norwich. It's not Norwich, it's Norwich. I know because I've been there. Found 17 bodies at the bottom of an 800-year-old well. The identity of the remains of the 6 adults and 11 children and why they ended up in the medieval well had long vexed archaeologists. Unlike other mass burials where skeletons are uniformly arranged, the bodies were oddly positioned and mixed, likely caused by being thrown headfirst shortly after their deaths. Ooh. Isn't that awful?
Yes.
To understand more about how these people died, scientists were recently able to extract detailed genetic material preserved in the bones thanks to recent advances in ancient DNA sequencing. The genomes of 6 of the individuals showed that 4 of them were related, including 3 sisters, the youngest of whom was 5 to 10 years old. Further analysis of the genetic material suggested that all 6 were almost certainly Ashkenazi Jews.
Oh, dear.
The researchers believe they all died during anti-Semitic violence that racked the city, most likely a February 1190 riot related to the Third Crusade, one of a series of religious wars supported by the church, as described by a medieval chronicler. The number of people killed in the massacre is unclear. 12 years, 12 years after they first started analyzing the remains of these individuals, technology has caught up and helped them to understand this historical cold case of who those people were and why they were murdered. Well, we know why they were murdered. Right. Judaism is primarily a shared religious and cultural identity, the study noted, but as a result of a long-standing practice of marrying within community, Ashkenazi Jewish groups often carry a distinctive genetic ancestry that includes markers for some rare genetic disorders. These include Tay-Sachs disease, which is usually fatal in childhood. The researchers found that the individuals in the well shared a similar genetic ancestry to present-day Ashkenazi Jews, who, according to the study, are descendants of medieval Jewish populations with histories mainly in Northern and Eastern Europe. Nobody had analyzed Jewish ancient DNA before because of prohibitions on the disturbance of Jewish graves. However, we did not know they were likely Jewish until after doing the genetic analysis. So they kind of had to go against Jewish belief because they didn't know they were Jewish and discovered something groundbreaking, really.
How horrific, but fascinating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
I would suggest because of the prevalence of anti-Semitic behavior in our history that whenever they find any kind of mass grave, they should definitely test for Ashkenazi Jews first and then rule it out, you know?
Right.
Sad but true.
It's shocking and so very sad. I didn't realize there was such a large Ashkenazi Jewish population in Great Britain
well, you didn't because they were all killed. So
they didn't want there to be, obviously.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. I think that's all I have.
I think you should take a break.
Okay, let's do that.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Genes with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/Cut Off Genes podcast. Now, back to the program.
Okay, it is story time, and it is part 2 of Sandy's. I'm not saying Sandy's last name, but part 2 of Sandy's story. What is delightful, other than the story, because she's a great storyteller, is I joined a adoptee writing group, and the first class was 2 weeks ago, and it's on Zoom. And when all the people started popping up, Sandy was one of them. So Sandy and I are in the same writing group.
That's a coincidence.
I know. Well, yeah, not really.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, it is, but it's a small community. It's a big, small community. So great to see her there, and it's delightful. Here is the second part of a 3-part series where we left off. Sandy had just mentioned that she became pregnant when she was 17.
Great. Let's listen in.
All right.
I got pregnant at 17.
Mm-hmm.
Moved out of the house, got married. That was a mistake.
Oh, dear. Well, 17.
Yeah, 17. I was barely 18 when my daughter was born, and I know you can relate to this, but I had a very difficult labor and didn't get to hold her when she was first born. So the next day when they brought her to me and I unfolded her blankets and touched her, I still remember that it was like this electrical buzz going through my body.
Oh, wow.
Because it was my flesh and blood on my lap in front of me, looking up at me. It was mine. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that feeling at all of having that. And so I had my daughter, and 2 years later had my oldest son, and then another 2 years had my younger son, and then went through a divorce.
Okay. Just get it out of the way. Wham, bam.
Yep. That's it. I'm done. I'm done. Then I had the tube tied.
Did you?
I did.
Good for you.
It only took me a little while to figure out that, they're expensive.
Yeah.
I would have kept having kids if they were just fun to have.
Sure.
But, So fast forward many, many years. Oh, no, I'm going back just a little bit. So I was raised in a Catholic family. Mm-hmm. Very Catholic, obviously, Sister Ruth and all of that.
Sure.
Went to a Catholic school. And I remember many times my adopted mom would test me. So you'd get the question we all get. Do you ever want to know your birth family?
Uh-huh.
And I knew the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
The right answer was, oh, no, absolutely not.
Right.
No. Why would I want to do that?
Yes.
And then at night, when I would say my prayers quietly to myself, I honestly would pray, dear God, please let me meet my brothers and sisters. I want to know them, and I want to know what my birth mother looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I never prayed that I would meet her and know her. I just wanted to know what she looked like.
Right.
Which is really interesting now that I look back on it, because it's exactly what I got.
Right. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was the same way. I think the thought of actually meeting my mother, and it's always the mother when you're that young too.
Mm-hmm.
The thought of actually meeting her, I couldn't even fathom, but I knew she existed. And so just a visual was all I really was hoping for at that point.
Yeah. And
That's a
I do
mirroring
think
thing.
Absolutely. And even early on, I think that I knew I didn't want to take the risk that she wouldn't want to know me. You know, I think I actually had even pieced that together pretty early, that if she sent me away, she doesn't want me. So probably seeing what she looks like is the best I'm going to get anyway.
Yes. And that's because you have an intellectual mind.
It's probably
It's true. You were able to like put two and two together and say there's a very, very high chance that she doesn't want to be found.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So let's see, fast forward many years, my mom was applying for Social Security. And when she went to her safety deposit box to get the paperwork, she found a letter that she had received from the doctor that delivered me, saying that my parents were Irish and I think they said British and something.
Right.
Well, this is pre, direct to consumer DNA tests.
Right.
I think it was 1993-ish.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. And I'm like, woohoo, I'm Irish. Yay.
Yeah.
So being the language nerd I am, I took 2 semesters of Gaelic.
Did you dye your hair red like I did when I first got my DNA results?
No, I didn't.
That's a well-known story here at CutOff Jeans.
I love that. I don't know if it would have looked good. I had dark hair at the time.
Okay.
It would have looked good.
Yeah.
But,
I had every color hair at that point. But anyway, I digress. Okay, go ahead.
I love that. I marched in, St. Patrick's Day parades, and I was Irish. This is awesome. Oh, yeah. I was like, I'm Irish. This is fantastic.
I love it.
So that year that I had found out, actually, it must have been 95, because my daughter graduated from high school and went to college about 3 hours from here. And the person who is now my husband, I was dating at the time, and we went to parents' weekend, and my older son stayed back at my parents' house to work that weekend. He was 16. And so when we came back and I picked him up, he said, hey, Mom, one of your high school friends called and was trying to get a hold of you and said her name. And I'm like, 700 people in my graduating class. It could have been anyone. So, okay, did you give her my number? Oh, yeah, she's going to call later tonight. So I get back home. My younger son answers the phone and says, Mom, it's for you. I answered. And the woman on the other end of the line says, is this Sandra? And I said, yes. And she says, my name is blank. And I'm from the state of Washington. I'm a court-appointed intermediary. And the minute she said it, I grabbed my husband's hand. I knew exactly why she was calling me.
Yeah.
And I said, yes. And she said, are you aware of the fact that you were adopted at birth? Yes. She called me the yes woman because every answer was yes. And then, I need to verify your birth date. And I said, okay. She says, no, this is where you tell me. Oh, okay. So, okay. I threw out my birth date, the hospital I was born in, my birth mother's name, that I had older siblings, and she just was floored. How do you know all of that? I explained how I had it. She said, well, it's definitely you that I'm trying to reach. Your siblings are looking for you. Would you like to be reunited?
Chills, full body chills right now. I just got them.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. And I said, oh, yes, absolutely. So back then what we had to do, I had to sign some paperwork saying that I would give her permission to make the contact because this is all being done as a court-appointed intermediary.
Gotcha.
And she said, take my phone number because if we're accidentally disconnected, I have to assume you hung up on me and I can't call you back.
Oh,
Really?
really?
Give me that number quick.
Oh, I didn't know that was a law or a rule. Wow, interesting.
Well, and it might have been, she was very new at what she was doing, so she might have read absolutely to the letter of
by the book,
everything.
right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it down, and she asked if I had a fax machine. And I said, no. These are the pre-email days. I said, no, I didn't have one. I was working in a school at the time. I would get the fax number there, and she could fax me the form in the morning. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. I need to talk to these people.
Yes.
It's Sunday night. You want me to wait until tomorrow morning?
Yeah, that is
No.
insane. How you expect me to sleep? Right.
So my first thought was, I need to get a hold of my sister, because I thought if anyone's going to understand how excited I am, it would be my sister.
Uh-huh.
She was furious with me. Furious.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope you're not planning on telling mom and dad on the phone. She was very upset with me. So I needed to find someone. So I tried calling my daughter in college and got her voicemail. And then I tried calling my best friend and got her voicemail.
Oh, that's the worst.
Come on. So my youngest son had mentioned his best friend's mom, who was just one of the dearest. I always say that she was an angel sent here on earth. She's just one of the nicest people. I called her, and she cried with me on the phone and was thrilled.
Thank God.
And I needed that.
Yeah.
And then my daughter called in.
Okay.
And while we were talking, I'm thinking, college, Kinko's. Kinko's has a fax machine.
Yes.
So I called the person back, and she said, hold on 1 minute. I'm on the other line with your sister.
Holy crap.
No.
Okay.
So she put her on hold, and she said, I can't do it because, it's Sunday night, and I really can't send a fax from my own fax machine because it can look like I just sent it, signed it, and sent it back to myself.
Oh.
And our local places are closed. And I know you can't do this. You're talking to my sister, please. And she said, well, you called me back. So, okay, I'll take the risk. And she sent it to Kinko's. My now husband drove me up to Kinko's. I signed the paperwork. By the time I got home, I was getting a phone call from my oldest sister. And that was that. And that was 27 years ago.
Okay.
So it's been a long time. I never knew if I was number 5 or there were 5 older than me.
Okay.
I was number 5. I have one brother. He's the second child. So the third child, that sister has pretty much been out of the picture on all of this. So at the time, oddly enough, she was living 45 minutes away from where I am in Milwaukee.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Yeah, it's very odd.
Yeah.
The way they found out about me, because I'd been this huge secret, no one knew anything about me.
Were they all kept?
They were all kept except one.
Okay.
So the fourth child, my sister immediately older than me by 15 months, was given to an aunt to adopt, a paternal aunt. And the way this all went down is that Wanda is my birth mother. Her husband was Byron. Wanda and Byron were going through a divorce. During the course of the divorce, before the divorce started, she got pregnant with the sister immediately older than me.
Okay.
Which just accelerated things.
Sure.
And then she got pregnant with me while she had moved out. They were apart. He's, of course, having all sorts of affairs. But that was okay because he can't get pregnant.
Right.
And he had a lot of family support. Like I said, she grew up in foster care. She really did not have a lot of family support. And so when they went to court, his family made the agreement with her that she could keep the 2 oldest kids if their family could take the next 2, but only if she would give up the baby she was carrying, which was me. She agreed to it, told the doctor what she was doing. She brought my sister to the in-laws when my sister was a year old, something that she still has not been able to get over. How do you just take a child at a year old and go drop them off somewhere?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, I look at it from the standpoint of this woman's doing anything she can to keep custody of any of her children.
Right. It's kind of a Sophie's choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then that aunt and her husband who took my sister moved her to Southern Oregon, almost into California, and never did formalize an adoption.
Oh, wow.
The aunt ran off, left my sister with the uncle who physically and sexually abused her. She ended up in foster care, but because of the family relationship, she knew who the siblings were. So many, many years later, she decides to go look for our brother because his name would not have changed.
Okay. Yes.
And he knows who she is. And that's how they get back together. And when they get back together, she says, I want to see I want to go to the courthouse and see the divorce papers so I understand why I was given up and the three of you were kept together. Because during the divorce, when they went into court, and I've heard this from both sides of the family, so I know this was the exact line, the judge looked at Wanda and said, "You have the morals of an alley cat. You're not taking these children." And he took them all away. So she had none. And now I understand why she's such an angry person, while the rest of them can't seem to understand why she was always so angry. But
wow.
So my sister then wants to look at the papers. They go to the papers. The woman behind the counter pulls up the microfiche and says, 5 living children of the marriage. And they're like, no, there were 4. And she says, no. And then reads off their names and adds baby boy, which was me.
Oh, what?
No. I swear I have had no surgeries of that nature. So apparently we never did understand, did the nuns tell her that I was a boy so she could not find me? Or did she tell the courts that I was a boy so none of them could find me? We didn't know. I found out later what most likely happened, but at that point we didn't know. So they found this. Well, my oldest sister still had a good relationship with her mom and our mom, and contacted Wanda to ask her, what do you have to say about this? Was there another child? Thinking it's a boy, of course. And Wanda denied all up and down. And then when she realized she was caught, and it was furious with the sister who had brought it all together, and actually sent her a scathing letter telling her to stay the hell away from her family. This is a very angry woman.
Yes. Yes.
So then they hired this court-appointed intermediary who then called my sister on the phone and said, "Are you sitting down? You don't have another brother. You have another sister."
How did they figure it out?
Funny thing is, because in Washington, at least at that time, I don't know how it is now, you could go before a judge and say, "We want this record opened." And the judge can decide yes or no. And the judge decided yes and gave her permission to look at my record.
The court-appointed intermediary?
Intermediary, yes.
So tell me again, who hired her, or what opened up this case in the first place?
I think it was my oldest sister.
Okay.
What happened is shortly after they found out about me, there was a newspaper article in the Aberdeen newspaper about this woman who had become a court-appointed intermediary. And they decided to contact her. She was still new at it. She told them how much she would charge. They said, yes, go ahead. And that was that. The thing is, I was blessed by the fact that this woman was brand new at it, because when she opened up the court papers and saw that the adoption actually took place in Wisconsin, she should have closed the record and not told them anything. But she didn't know that.
Because it was across state lines, or just?
Yes. Because it didn't take place in Washington. She didn't have a right to do it.
I get it. Okay.
So there were a lot of really interesting twists and turns in this.
So
and
complicated.
Then, I know it always is. There isn't really a simple adoption. I don't care what anyone else says.
There's no such thing.
There's always a backstory.
Yeah.
So we were reunited. I flew out there. It's interesting. People have said to me since then, for those of us who are adoptees who, hop on a plane and go out to meet this family, that we know they're strangers to us, but we absolutely trust that we can fly out and stay at their house.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Sandi, for that. Part 3 will be in our next episode.
Thank you, Sandi. In the meantime, I am Richard Castle, and you can go to my website, richardcastle.com, to find out what I do when I am not on this podcast, or you can follow me on the Twitter or on Instagram @CastleSongs.
I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. Find all things Julie Dixon Jackson at cutoffjeans.com. Also find us on the Twitter, Cutoff Jeans Pod, the Facebook group, private Facebook group, ask to join. We're growing exponentially. And if you would like help with your case or have any questions, please contact me through cutoffjeans.com or any of the other socials that you are aware of.
Julie, how would you like to leave it today for our listeners?
I'd like to leave it with this. The truth is in your genes.